Welcome. I don't know how to introduce this, but my name is Joe and I am a automotive photographer based out of Indianapolis, Indiana. And today I'm going to take you through my editing workflow for my photos. If you're new here and you don't know who I am, I have an Instagram page where I have been posting consistently every single day, twice a day. I do a POV setup of taking you on my journey as an automotive photographer, showing you the process and giving you some tips and tricks along the way. But mostly it's just me running around babbling like an idiot. I wanted to create this video to show you the workflow I have for editing my photos. Today I'm going to be showing you an example from the Indianapolis 8-hour endurance race that I shot a few weeks ago. Throughout this video, I'm just going to show you, why am I talking like Tim Cook? Welcome. No, I'm just kidding. I will simply be walking you through every step of my process, from cropping the image and selecting a preset to adjusting the light, the color, and the masking. This is by no means a tutorial. This is just simply showing how I do my editing. If you have any questions about my editing style or want to join in a conversation, feel free to leave a comment below. So we're gonna go ahead and start off. I have an image of an Audi V10 race car from the Indy 8-hour race. This is a completely flat image. I am shooting on a Sony a7 IV in an uncompressed RAW format. So this image has the most data that you can possibly get. What we're gonna go ahead and do is start off by cropping the image. For all of my landscape shots, I always crop 5:4, and for portraits, I crop 4:5. This is the sweet spot for Instagram. We'll go ahead and crop that in. Get a lot of that dead space cut out around the sides. From here, I'm gonna go ahead and select my preset. Now, these presets are ones that I have designed, and if you have never seen these presets before because you don't follow my Instagram, I do have a link of them in my channel where you can go see examples of them and images I've edited in the past. I'm going to simply go through here and see which one of these I like the most. Each one of these presets are gonna look vastly different from one another as I go through. Really, I'm just trying to find what mood I want to have for the image. And going forward, any other images I edit of this car, I'm gonna use the same preset because I wanna keep that mood consistent across all of those images. I'm kind of torn between Industrial Park, Golden Hour Cruise, and G Station Run. G Station Run was more designed for night shooting. But the nice thing is that a lot of these can be used for different scenarios. So we're gonna go with G Station Run. And here you can see that there's a little bit overexposure in some areas, like over here behind the vehicle, there's this wall that's a little bit brighter. So bright, in fact, that you can see that the wing of the car kind of blends in. So what I'll go ahead and do is adjust some of the global settings to try and reduce that so it's not blending in with one another. And it looks like highlights really helped out there. What I'm also going to do is adjust the curve of this to bring the contrast back. So this preset is specifically to make a lesser contrast look to the image. But for this image, I want to have more contrast. And that's the beauty of presets. You can change everything about them. You don't have to leave it as it is. So we'll go ahead and find a sweet spot there. I think I'm gonna add another control point here so I can adjust a little bit more of the shadows. Brighten those up a little bit. This slider right here for blacks, it also decreases contrast. So if I bring that up, it does make the image brighter, but it makes the contrast go down. So to add in more contrast, I'm gonna bring that back down closer to 0. And then I'm also gonna balance that out by bringing up the exposure just a little bit to bring back the overall visibility of the image. I also notice here too that there's a lot of red going on in the image. Now this is by design for the preset itself. But what I'm going to go ahead and do is come down here to my color grading section, and I'm going to reduce the intensity of the reds and oranges by selecting this and dragging it back so that the saturation is lower. I will go ahead and do the same for the midtones. And then while I'm here, I'm gonna do it for the shadows. Now, normally I don't like to change the shadows on the color grading side because it does make it look super unrealistic. If I want to go for a more artistic look, then I will use it. In this case, I'm not trying to go for a super artistic look, but I would like to have my blues in there because the way that I do this color grading is I do what's called complementary. Complementary is just simply selecting two colors that are opposite from one another, and that brings them together, makes it look really nice. This is designed around the orange and teal look. So night shoots, this is a really awesome look to go with. Because this is a sunrise sort of shoot, I don't need or want to have a lot of orange and teals in there, complementing one another. The nice thing about color grading is that you can add a small amount of it and you can still make the image look really awesome. You don't need to go crazy and pull the slider all the way to one side or the other. Now, although that did help me a little bit, I still see a lot of warmth going on in this photo. And on my camera, I shoot in auto white balance on purpose. It's a personal preference. Some people will adjust for the white balance of this scenario they're shooting in. I find that my Sony a7 IV does a pretty decent job with auto white balance, so I shoot in auto white balance as of right now. What's great about that is that in editing, you can adjust that. Because my image looks a little bit more warm, I'm gonna bring down the temperature just a little bit. You can see a lot of that warmth has now gone away. Now it looks a little bit cooler in some areas. I think this is a good spot so far. Another thing that I need to do is enable my lens correction. Lens correction is simply going to help adjust for the barrel distortion that you have in your lens. You can see here that I shot this image on a 24 to 70 millimeter f2.8 lens by Sigma. It is my only lens for this camera, so that is the only lens I shoot with. But you can see it kind of like made the image more flat. Another thing I'm going to do is take a look at the details tab. I don't like to over sharpen my image. I do like, however, to enhance the lines of the car a little bit. So a cool trick that I like to do is I grab this masking slider here and I hold down Option key on Mac and I drag that to the right. And as I do that, you can see the lines becoming more visible. And so what I'll do is find a good spot to drop it at. So 69, nice. So basically what that is doing is it's masking out everything else from the photo, but what you see in white. So if we look at this again, you can see all the stuff that's in white is going to be what's sharpened. I will go ahead and just turn up the sharpening to about 50. You don't really need to do a whole lot here. It doesn't look like a lot has happened. All you're doing is enhancing that line between what's in focus and what's out of focus. You're not gonna fix the image if it's out of focus at all. You're simply enhancing the lines like right here where this wing is, because that's what's in focus. And you're making more of a separation from the background that's out of focus. Don't go too crazy here. You don't need to go too crazy. Now at this point, I can go around and I can tinker some more with some of these global settings. I, however, want to jump into the best part, which is how do I separate the car from the background and give it more depth? In order to do that, I'm gonna go over here to my masking tab, and normally I would select subject. The subject AI in Adobe is more so designed for people, not objects. There is an objects button right here, and this is not automatic. You have to actually paint it. So we'll go ahead and paint this real quick. Come up here, I like to get the outline of the car first, and I do the zigzag across. I'm telling Adobe what to select, and then it's just gonna kind of fill in the gaps from there. So we're gonna see what this does. And it didn't do too bad, but it did select the flags. I don't know. I'm gonna go ahead and clean this up real quick. I don't know why I had to clean it up. Why can't you guys just get it right the first time? Even selected people in the grandstand. Normally this is really accurate. I don't have to do as much cleanup. The perfectionist side of me is what pushes me to do this though. Actual cleaning up the edges. You'll get some edges that aren't perfect. What's really nice about it is that there is a feather with the selection. So you're not gonna see these clear-cut lines where it's different. Now that we've cleaned up, we're gonna add back in because it somehow missed this part of the wing, the support for the wing right here, this support as well. And you don't have to be like coloring within the lines like you had to when you're a kid and you have this coloring book. It's really not that deep. You just want to get a general selection of it. It's kind of hard to see it back here because this blends in with the background really well. So I can understand why the AI didn't catch that. And you can see, like, again, my lines are kind of like spilling over. If they do, you can hit Option or hold down Option on Mac. You can clean up those lines. You can go back and forth between adding and subtracting. Probably would make sense to actually reduce my brush size because it is a smaller object. Cool. So I think let's zoom out here and see how it looks overall. So it looks better overall. This, again, the selection is not going to be picture perfect. That was a pun intended. Now that we have the selection made, we're gonna go ahead and make some minor adjustments. So for cars like to bring highlights down, it does show off more body lines. And then I also bring up the shadows. This looks a bit dramatic. And because this has white in it, we're gonna bring up the whites a little bit. Because typically whenever I bring highlights down, you can see how the whites get a little bit more dull. So I'm not trying to take down the highlights too much because I do want the white of the car to stand out more. So I'm gonna bring it down just a little bit here, and then I have my whites up a little bit here to enhance them. Because I have the shadows brought up on the car itself, it's going to make everything look super flat and no contrast at all. What I do is counteract that with the black slider. So I'll bring this black slider down for the car, and you can see that contrast coming back in. And usually I have this peaking display on, so if it gets too dark, it will highlight those areas blue. And for some reason, it's not working for me right now. So we're gonna go without it. So we bring this down to about 40. Let's go to -40 here for this one. And my shadows, we can play around with that a little bit more because I do want to bring out the detail of the car, but I don't want to bring it out so much that it makes the image look flat. So having the shadows brought up brings out more detail in areas like the wheel, the rear bumper where there's not a lot of lighting. And then the blacks, when you bring them down, it brings back more contrast while still giving you the exposure you want to have in those darker areas. So this is a pretty good spot for this right here. The next thing I'm gonna do is massive in the overall look of the photo. I'm going to create what's called a sandwich. Definitely not something I created, but it is something that I use all the time. And you can do this in two ways. You can do it with light and you can do it with color. In this scenario, I'm gonna do it in light. So what you do is we'll create a new linear mask. We're going to bring it from the top and drag it down. I usually bring it to about halfway where the red is hitting the car and about halfway through the image. We'll go ahead and subtract our object. So now that I've gone through and roughly colored out the areas I don't want selected for this linear, I'm going to make my adjustments for just the linear gradient. Typically what I will do is I will drop the exposure in more than one way. If I take just the exposure down like this, it's gonna look unrealistic and it's gonna look kind of ugly. I will actually start with highlights first because generally if you're looking at the sky, there's a lot more highlights there than there would be on the ground. So I'll take the highlights down a little bit. You can see that the blue looks a little bit more rich. And I'll also take down the shadows a little bit so that the way the pagoda right here, the overhang is a little bit darker. And then maybe I'll bring down the exposure just a little bit. So that's one half of our sandwich. Now we're gonna do the other half. We're going to create a new linear mask, drag it this time from the bottom up, and going to have it cover the vehicle about halfway through the image. We'll subtract subject. Now, because earlier I was having issues with selecting subject up here, but not down here, I can just say select the subject and it does a pretty decent job here. Now that I have this subject subtracted from the gradient itself, I can go ahead and make my adjustments. Similar with the linear gradient at the top with the sky, I'm not going to just grab the exposure and throttle it down because it's not going to look good. Instead, I'm going to mess with my shadows and blacks to darken the foreground. Because we're looking at the ground, there's a lot more shadows, there's a lot more darker areas. So these are generally the two sliders I mess with. And if I want to add onto it, I can bring back the exposure just a little bit, similar to what I did up top. Now what this is doing is it's creating a sandwich. So you have your top linear gradient and your bottom linear gradient as your slices of bread. And then the subject in the middle is whatever you want your sandwich to be. If you like burgers, you like burgers. If you like tuna salad, you like tuna salad. What it is accomplishing is it's bringing your attention towards the middle of the image. So if I were to do this with my hands and you're just looking at my face the entire time, it's because this is blocking your view of anything else up here, and this is blocking your view of anything down here. And it's making you focus on the center of the image. You can accomplish this with color as well. So if I wanted to, I can do warm and cold to give you your source of light and your shadows. And that gives it that 3D effect. The one last thing I'll do to enhance this is I'll add another linear mask from the direction that the light source is coming from, which was the sun. So over here, we're gonna go ahead and bring this linear gradient out. With this linear gradient, I like to back it off a little bit to where there's less intensity, because I don't want it to be so artificial looking that you know it's not really the sun. What I'll do here is I'll mostly mess with the highlights, bring those up, be dramatic and see how it looks, see how it affects the image, and find a decent spot right about here maybe, because we want this light kind of spilling into the image because that is where it's coming from. Increase the warmth of that side of the image just a little bit to give you the sense that the sun is there. This is another simple thing that you can add into it to give it more depth, more of a 3D look. You don't have to do this all the time, but that is a good example of it. When I export these images for the video, I export it in a small format. So what I mean by that is I'll go here to my export photo. It'll bring up this menu. And on the right-hand side, you can see the settings that I have here. The dimensions I change to small, and I make sure that the output sharpening is for screen because this is going onto a video that you will be viewing on screens. Then I'll export my photo to the project file that I have. I'll add it in. I will do the whole sliding thing for the before and after. That is something I will do in a separate video. If that is what you're interested in, please leave a comment down below and I can show you my workflow for the videos. Now, when I go and do my carousel pose to actually show the images in a still format, I will re-export this same photo, but I will use the full size option because then if I blow it up on Photoshop, it won't distort the image. That is a quick rundown of my workflow process in Adobe Lightroom. If you would like to see more stuff like this, please be sure to leave a comment down below letting me know. And if you haven't checked out my Instagram page, go check it out. I've been posting there daily for over 70 days and I plan to continue that. Thank you so much for watching this video and I'll see you next time.